It was a bright, crisp morning when Rachel walked into my house, her eyes cold as she glanced around, as if she was already looking for something to criticize. "Make sure you leave the house clean, okay?" she said, her voice almost casual, but I could hear the edge in it. It was one of those moments when your gut tightens, and you just know something isn't right, but you can't put your finger on it. Maybe I should have ignored it, let it roll off my shoulders like so many other things I'd let slide over the years. But I couldn't. That simple sentence struck a chord deep within me. It wasn't just about the house. It was something else, something I had to figure out. Little did I know, that small request would open a door to things I never saw coming. And Rachel? She had no idea what she was about to walk into. Before I tell you what happened next, would you do me a favor? Hit that subscribe button, turn on the little bell, and let me know where you're watching from. It really helps us know where these stories are reaching. My name's Mary, and I'm 72 years old, though I've lived a lifetime's worth in these years. I'm a mother of 3, a grandmother of 6, and if you'd asked me a few months ago, I would have said I'd seen it all. I live in a modest home in a quiet corner of Ohio, where nothing much ever happens, or at least that's what I thought. I spend my days knitting, reading, baking cookies, and tending to my garden, nothing fancy, but it's enough. It's a peaceful life, one I've worked hard to build after all the ups and downs. My husband, Charlie, passed away 2 years ago, and since then, I've had a lot of time to reflect on the years that came before. It's a quiet life, but it's mine. Or it was, until Rachel, my daughter-in-law, started showing up more often, with that look in her eyes, like she was trying to dig up something she didn't like. I'd always thought we had a good relationship, but recently, I began to wonder. And that morning, when she dropped that line about the house, something inside me snapped out. I didn't know it then, but that simple request was the spark that would ignite everything. You see, family secrets have a way of hiding in plain sight, buried deep in the corners of your mind. And sometimes, it only takes a push, a nudge, to bring them all to the surface. So, I did what any reasonable woman would do. I took a deep breath, let her words settle, and walked away. But the truth? Well, it was coming, and no amount of cleaning could scrub it away. I'll be honest, I was a little rattled after Rachel's comment. It wasn't just the words. It was the way she said it, like she was giving me some sort of ultimatum. But I pushed those thoughts aside. I had bigger things to focus on, like the pot roast I was cooking for dinner and the fact that my grandkids would be over soon. That was the part of my life I enjoyed, the simple things. The laughter in my kitchen, the smell of something baking in the oven, the sound of little feet running through the house. That's what kept me going, especially after Charlie passed. But Rachel? She didn't care about any of that. She barely ever made the time to visit on her own, but lately, she'd been popping up unannounced. At first, I thought it was just because of the holidays, but something told me there was more to it. That morning, after her comment, I couldn't shake the feeling that she was watching me more closely than usual. Maybe she was waiting for me to slip up. I'm not sure. But as I cleaned the house that day, scrubbing every corner like she'd asked, I couldn't help but wonder, what does she really want from me? The next few days were awkward, to say the least. I didn't hear much from Rachel, aside from a few short, clipped phone calls. She'd call to check in, but it was all business, no warmth, no connection. And then, just as I was starting to think maybe I was overreacting, she called again. "Mom, I need you to come over tomorrow, to drop off the things I asked for." I knew the things she was referring to. It wasn't anything important. Some old family photos I'd been meaning to give her, a few of my mother's old cooking utensils that Rachel had always admired. So, I packed everything up in a box and made my way over. Her house was in the same quiet neighborhood, just a few streets over. But when I walked through the front door, I was met with a silence that felt strange. "Mary, in here," Rachel called from the kitchen, her voice sharp and cold. I walked down the hall, the floorboards creaking under my weight, and found her sitting at the table, staring at her phone. She didn't even look up at me when I entered. "Here," I said, handing her the box of photos and old kitchen items. I waited for her to acknowledge it, but she didn't. Instead, she set her phone down and stared at me for a long moment. Like she was trying to figure something out. "I saw you've been doing a lot of cleaning at your place," she said finally, her tone still hard. "Are you sure everything's in order?" The question hit me like a ton of bricks. What was she getting at? Why was she asking about my house now? I could feel my blood begin to boil. Of course, everything's in order, I said, my voice a little sharper than I intended. She nodded, her lips pressed into a thin line, and then looked away. There was something in her eyes, something I hadn't seen before. It was a mix of distrust and something else I couldn't quite place. She was staring at me like I was a stranger. And that was when I realized, this wasn't about cleaning the house. This wasn't about anything trivial. I stood there in the doorway, my heart pounding, as the silence stretched between us. I wanted to ask her what was really going on. But I didn't. Instead, I turned to leave, but just before I did, Rachel spoke again. "Mary," she said softly. Her voice tinged with something I couldn't read. "I just hope you're not hiding anything from us." I didn't say anything in response. I couldn't. Because the truth was, I didn't know what she was talking about. But as I walked out that door, something inside me told me that whatever was coming, I wouldn't be able to stop it. I didn't sleep much that night. The air in the house felt heavy, like something was hanging just out of reach. Rachel's words, "I hope you're not hiding anything from us," kept replaying in my mind. The more I thought about it, the more it unsettled me. I kept telling myself I was just being paranoid, that Rachel was probably just stressed, but deep down, I knew something wasn't right. There was a shift in the way she looked at me. Something cold in her eyes that I hadn't noticed before. The next morning, as I was sipping my coffee and staring out the kitchen window, I remembered something strange. A few weeks ago, when I'd gone over to Rachel's house for dinner, I'd noticed a few documents scattered on the kitchen counter. It was nothing more than a fleeting glance, but there had been one paper that stood out, a letter, partially hidden beneath some other things, with a familiar name on it. I couldn't recall all the details, but I remembered feeling a chill when I saw it. I shook off the thought at the time, telling myself it was nothing. But now, that memory nagged at me, and I couldn't ignore it any longer. What if there was something going on that I didn't know about? Something that had been hidden from me all these years? I decided to pay Rachel another visit, but this time, I wasn't going to walk in empty-handed. I wasn't going to just sit there and let her control the conversation. Something was off, and I was going to find out what. I arrived at her house around noon, when I knew she would be home from work. I didn't knock this time. I just walked in. "Mary?" Rachel called from the living room, her voice laced with surprise. I didn't respond right away. I didn't need to. I was already heading straight for the kitchen. There it was, the same counter where I had seen the documents before. This time, I didn't hesitate. I picked up the papers and began sifting through them. There was a lot of financial information, stuff I couldn't make sense of at first. But then, there it was again. A letter with the same name I'd seen before, only this time, it wasn't hidden. I stood there, staring at the letter in my hands, the words starting to make sense. It was an application for a loan, a very large loan, one that I knew Rachel hadn't discussed with me. I was shocked, but it was more than that. The loan was for a property. A house. And not just any house, but the house I'd lived in for the past 20 years. I felt my blood run cold. What was Rachel planning? The house had always been in Charlie's name, but after he passed, it was left to me. There was no way she could have known I was planning to leave it to my son. Or could she? I'd never told anyone. Only Charlie and I knew the details. I couldn't wrap my mind around it. Was Rachel trying to take my house from me? Was she plotting behind my back? The thought made my stomach turn. Before I could gather my thoughts, I heard Rachel's footsteps behind me. She was standing in the doorway, watching me. "You weren't supposed to find that," she said quietly, her tone now laced with something I hadn't heard before, fear. I turned to face her, my heart pounding. "What's going on, Rachel?" I demanded. "Why is there a loan application in my name? Why didn't you tell me about this?" Rachel took a deep breath, her eyes darting around the room as if searching for a way out. She couldn't hide it anymore. "The truth was out in the open. I didn't want you to find out like this," she said, her voice trembling. "But I need the house, Mary. We need the house." "And no," I interrupted, my voice steady but firm. "This house isn't yours to take. It was never yours. I've worked my whole life to keep it, and you think you can just waltz in and take it from me?" Rachel's face flushed with anger, and she took a step toward me, but I didn't flinch. You don't understand. I was doing this for us, for the family, she said, her voice rising. We need more money, more space. The loan? It's the only way to get ahead. I stared at her in disbelief. By taking what's mine? By hiding things from me? That's how you think you'll get ahead? Her face crumbled, and for a moment, I saw something like regret in her eyes. But it was too late. The damage had already been done. There was no going back from this. I wasn't sure what came over me next, but something inside me snapped. The thought of Rachel trying to pull this over on me, behind my back, pushed me to the edge. You don't get to take what I've worked for, Rachel. You don't get to steal my future, I said, my voice steady now. With the calmness of a woman who had finally had enough, Rachel stood frozen. Caught in the weight of her own deceit. Get out of my house, I said, my words colder than I'd ever intended. But I meant them, and as she walked out the door, I knew this was just the beginning. The truth was out now, and there was no turning back. Rachel's departure left a quiet kind of stillness in the house. The kind you get when something important has shifted, but no one has yet found the words to make sense of it. I didn't know what I expected, maybe her to apologize, maybe for her to break down and admit her wrongs. But that didn't happen. She just left, and I was left standing there, alone with the truth I'd just uncovered. The rest of the day felt like a blur. I couldn't focus on anything. My mind kept circling back to that loan application, the house, the way Rachel had tried to take something from me without even telling me. My blood boiled thinking about it. She had betrayed me, not just as a daughter-in-law but as family. By the time evening came around, I was pacing back and forth in the living room, 100 different thoughts running through my head. I had to make sure Rachel knew I wasn't going to let her get away with it. This wasn't just about a house anymore. It was about respect, about trust, about taking what was mine and giving it to someone who didn't deserve it. I dialed her number. The phone rang, once, twice. Then she picked up. Mary, she said, her voice tight, like she had been waiting for this call. I know what you're going to say. But you don't understand. No, I interrupted, my voice hard. You don't understand. You think you can just waltz in here, make plans for my future, and I wouldn't notice? You're wrong, Rachel. I've been quiet for too long, but not anymore. I won't let you take what's mine. There was silence on the other end. I could hear Rachel breathing, but she didn't speak for a long moment. I could almost hear her calculating her next move. She was no fool, she knew she had overstepped. But I wasn't going to let her have the upper hand anymore. I didn't want to hurt you, Mary, she said finally, her voice shaky. I was just trying to help. I thought you'd understand. I didn't mean for things to get out of hand. I laughed, though there was no humor in it. Help? You think this is helping? Trying to take everything from me behind my back? This isn't help, Rachel. This is theft. And you're going to pay for it. I didn't mean to, she started, but I cut her off again. No. You didn't mean to? You think that's enough to make this okay? It's not. You've crossed a line, and now you'll have to live with the consequences. I took a deep breath, feeling my anger rise. But I had to stay calm. We'll settle this the right way. I'm going to make sure everyone knows the truth. And when they do, you'll see just how far your lies have gone. There was a long pause. Then, I heard Rachel's voice again, but it was different. It wasn't the voice of a woman who was trying to justify herself anymore. It was the voice of someone who had finally realized she couldn't win. You can't do this. Mary. You don't know what you're getting into. I know exactly what I'm getting into, I said, my words slow and deliberate. And I'm ready for it. You've made your choice, Rachel. And now, so have I. We hung up. But I knew this wasn't over. Not by a long shot. The truth was, I wasn't going to just sit back and let Rachel walk all over me. She had crossed a line, and I wasn't going to let her get away with it. There was no turning back now. I'd spent my whole life trying to keep the peace, trying to be the loving mother and grandmother. But this time, there was no peace to be made. This wasn't about forgiveness. This wasn't about understanding. This was about justice, and I was going to get it. No matter what. The days that followed felt like a storm had rolled through and left me standing in the wreckage. I wasn't sure what I was supposed to do next. Rachel had said so little, and yet, her silence spoke volumes. She had crossed a line, and I couldn't just pretend it didn't happen. But still, something nagged at me. There was more to this story. I felt it in my bones. Rachel wasn't the only one with secrets. I spent the next few days going over everything, every conversation, every moment I had ever shared with Rachel, with my son, and even with my late husband, Charlie. And then it hit me. I remembered the small, seemingly insignificant things. A comment Rachel had made at Thanksgiving 2 years ago. The way she'd been more interested in the house than in anything else when she visited. The odd way she'd always ask about the mortgage. Like she was keeping tabs on it. I had been so focused on the betrayal. On the fact that she had tried to take my house. That I hadn't realized something bigger was at play. I needed to look deeper. I started digging through some old family documents, insurance policies, old tax forms, anything that might give me a clearer picture. It was late one night when I found it. Tucked between a stack of paperwork I hadn't looked at in years was a small, faded envelope with my name on it. I had no memory of it, but it was clearly old, the edges worn and yellowed. I opened it carefully. Inside was a letter, written in Charlie's handwriting. My heart skipped a beat. Mary, I know I've kept this from you for a long time, but I think it's time you knew. There's something about the house that isn't what it seems. We're not the only ones with a claim to it. Rachel has been involved in more than you think. Don't trust her. You'll understand why soon enough. The letter wasn't long, but it was enough to make my stomach drop. What did he mean? What was going on with Rachel? Had Charlie known all along? And if he did, why hadn't he told me? I sat there, staring at the letter, my mind racing. This wasn't just about a loan. This wasn't just about Rachel trying to take my house. It was about something deeper, something Charlie had known, something I hadn't even begun to understand. I felt betrayed, but more than that, I felt lost. How long had Rachel been plotting this? How long had she been working behind my back? I thought back to all the times we had laughed together, shared meals, talked about family. Was that all a lie? Was she playing me all along? The letter didn't give me all the answers, but it gave me enough to start putting the pieces together. The house, the loan, Rachel's strange behavior, it was all connected. And Charlie had known. The one person I had trusted most in the world had known, and he hadn't told me. I couldn't keep living in the dark. It was time to confront Rachel, but this time, it wouldn't be with questions. This time, I had the truth on my side. I spent the rest of the evening preparing, gathering all the evidence I had, every document, every letter, every record I had found. I would make sure Rachel knew that I wasn't just some naive woman she could push around. This time, I would be the one in control. When I finally called her, my hand was steady, my voice clear. I know what's going on, Rachel, I said, my words calm but unwavering. And you're not going to get away with it. She didn't say anything at first, and I could almost hear her scrambling, trying to figure out how much I knew. But there was no running this time. I'm coming over, I said. And when I do, we're going to talk. For real. The line went silent, but I knew she was listening. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was holding the cards. I wasn't going to let her take what was mine, not the house. Not my peace, and certainly not my dignity. This was my fight now. And I wasn't going to lose. The moment I hung up with Rachel, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders, but it wasn't enough to ease the tension in my chest. I had all the evidence now. I had Charlie's letter, the documents, the loan application, everything. But I still wasn't sure how this was going to play out. Rachel had a way of twisting the truth, of making things seem like they were my fault. I couldn't afford to let her spin this. It was time to take control. I didn't wait long. By the next morning, I was already on my way to Rachel's house. I couldn't sit around and wait for her to make the next move. She had already crossed too many lines, and I wasn't about to let her think she could get away with it. When I arrived, I saw her car in the driveway. I took a deep breath and walked up to the door. As I knocked, my mind was racing. I had been in situations like this before, where everything you've believed in gets turned upside down. But this was different. I wasn't going to back down. Not this time. Rachel opened the door, her eyes wide with surprise. She hadn't been expecting me so soon. Mary, she started, but I didn't let her finish. I know what you've been doing, I said, my voice steady but firm. And I'm done letting you lie your way out of this. She took a step back, her face draining of color. Mary, please, she said, her voice shaky. You don't understand. I didn't mean to, I raised a hand to silence her. You meant to, Rachel. Don't try to pretend you didn't. You've been hiding things from me for months, and I'm not going to let you keep doing it. I stepped past her into the house, my eyes scanning the familiar walls of the living room. There was no comfort here anymore. Everything felt wrong. The house that had been a safe haven for so many years now felt like a battlefield. Sit down, I said, my voice cold. We need to talk. Rachel hesitated but then slowly sat down on the couch, her hands shaking in her lap. I took a seat across from her, watching her carefully. She looked like she was trying to keep it together, but I could see the cracks forming. She knew this wasn't something she could talk her way out of. I found the letter, I said, watching her face. The one Charlie wrote. The one you didn't want me to see. And I know about the loan, Rachel. I know everything. She didn't speak for a moment, her eyes darting around the room as if searching for an escape. Please, Mary, she said again, her voice almost pleading. I was just trying to help. I thought if we could get the loan, if we could get the house, maybe it would help the family. We've been struggling. You don't understand. I understand more than you think, I replied, my voice steady. You've been using me, using my trust, for your own gain. And that's not something I'm going to let slide. I reached into my purse and pulled out the documents. Here. These are the loan papers, the ones you've been trying to keep hidden. You wanted that house, didn't you, Rachel? You wanted to take what's mine and make it yours. Her face crumpled as she looked at the papers. Mary, I never meant for things to go this far. I thought maybe if I could get control of the house, we could make a fresh start. I didn't think it would hurt anyone. You didn't think? I repeated, my voice rising. You didn't think about the damage this would cause? The betrayal? The lies? You've been so consumed with what you wanted, you didn't care about what you were willing to destroy in the process. Tears welled up in Rachel's eyes, but I wasn't moved. This wasn't about her tears anymore. It wasn't about the excuses or the apologies. It was about justice. I trusted you, Rachel. And you betrayed that trust, I said quietly. You've done enough damage, and now it's time for you to face the consequences. You can't just keep lying and hiding. Not anymore. The silence hung in the air between us like a heavy curtain, and for a moment, I thought Rachel might say something more, beg me to forgive her, ask for a second chance. But she didn't. She sat there, her face pale and defeated, and I knew the fight was over. I stood up, gathering the documents. I'm going to make sure everyone knows the truth. The family, the bank, anyone who needs to hear it. You can't just take what doesn't belong to you. I didn't look back as I left her house. I knew that things would never be the same again. But that was fine. I had done what I needed to do. The truth was out now, and Rachel would have to live with it. I didn't waste time after leaving Rachel's house. The truth had been exposed, and now it was time to make sure that everyone knew what was really going on. I wasn't going to let her get away with this, not after everything she had done. I had always believed in doing things the right way, even when it was hard, and now, it felt like the only option. I spent the next few days gathering everything I could find, letters, legal papers, the documents that Rachel had tried to hide. I made copies of everything, preparing myself to take action. This wasn't just about getting justice for me. This was about ensuring that Rachel couldn't get away with her lies and manipulation. That I knew the family wouldn't believe me right away. Rachel was good at playing the victim, at twisting the truth until it was barely recognizable. But I had something she didn't, proof. Real, undeniable proof. And I wasn't going to sit back and let her continue to manipulate everyone around her. I called my son, Matthew. He was always a bit distant from Rachel and me, but I needed him on my side. I needed him to understand what had been happening behind my back. Mom, he said when he picked up the phone, his voice warm but tired. What's going on? I haven't heard from you in a few days. Are you okay? I'm fine, Matthew, I said, my voice steady. But there's something I need to talk to you about. Something important. There was a pause on the other end. I could tell he was concerned, but I had to say it, no matter how hard it was. It's about Rachel. I could hear him shift in his chair. What about Rachel? Is something wrong? I sighed. Yes. She's been hiding things from me, Matthew. Things you need to know. She's been trying to take my house, get a loan under false pretenses, and now? Well, now, I have all the proof. I can't just let this go. There was silence for a moment. What are you talking about? He asked, his voice hesitant. I have the documents. I have everything, I said, my tone firm. I know what she's been doing behind my back, and it's time for the truth to come out. He didn't respond immediately, and I could feel the tension building between us. I had raised him to trust me, to know that I would never lie to him. But this was Rachel. She had a way of turning things around, of convincing people she was the victim. Okay, Matthew said finally. I'll come over. We'll talk. I hung up the phone and went to work. It was time to make things official. I called a lawyer I trusted, someone who had helped me with a few legal matters in the past. I explained the situation, and he listened carefully, taking notes. You've got a strong case, Mary, he said after a long pause. If what you're saying is true, we can move forward with a formal complaint. We'll need to gather all the documents you have and present them to the court. I nodded. This was it. There was no turning back now. Within hours, Matthew arrived at my house. He looked tired, a little worn down by the weight of everything. I could tell he didn't fully understand what was going on, but he was here. That was what mattered. I handed him the stack of documents, watching his face as he skimmed through the papers. The more he read, the more his expression hardened. I had no idea, he said quietly, his voice strained. I didn't know she was capable of this. I didn't either, I replied, feeling a pang of guilt. But she's crossed a line, Matthew. And now, we have to make sure she faces the consequences. The room was thick with tension as we talked through the next steps. I couldn't help but feel a sense of determination rising inside me. This was bigger than just Rachel and me. This was about making sure that no one could come into my life, take what I had worked for, and walk away without a fight. After we'd gone over everything, Matthew nodded. We'll do it the right way. I'll help you, Mom. We'll get this sorted out. For the first time in days, I felt a sense of relief. The weight of the situation was still heavy, but at least I wasn't carrying it alone anymore. We made our plan. We would file a formal complaint, get a court date, and make sure Rachel knew that she couldn't just walk away from this. There would be no more lies, no more manipulation. This time, the truth would win. As I looked at Matthew, I saw the same fire in his eyes that I had always seen in mine. It was a reminder that no matter how difficult things got, we had each other. And together, we would make sure that justice was done. The days that followed were filled with paperwork, legal calls, and a tension that hung over everything. It wasn't just the legal battle I was facing now, it was the emotional toll. Rachel's betrayal, the lies, and the damage she had done to our family, it all weighed heavily on me. But I wasn't backing down. I couldn't. The court date was set, and the nerves that had been simmering for days finally bubbled up. I had done everything I could to prepare. I had the evidence, documents, photos, letters, and I had Matthew by my side. But as the day approached, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was about to change forever. It was the morning of the hearing when I saw Rachel again. She called me, of all things. Her voice was shaky when she spoke, and for a brief moment, I almost felt pity for her. Mary, she said, her voice soft. I'm sorry. I never meant for it to go this far. I just wanted things to be better for us, for the family. I could hear the desperation in her voice. The way she was trying to make it sound like this was all some sort of mistake. But it wasn't a mistake. It was a betrayal. And I wasn't going to fall for it again. Rachel, I said, my voice calm but unwavering. It's too late for apologies. You made your choices, and now you're going to have to live with them. I could hear her breathing heavily, like she was holding back tears. But I didn't feel sorry for her. I felt angry, frustrated, and finally, resolute. She had done enough damage to this family. It was time for the truth to be heard. When we arrived at the courthouse, the weight of the situation hit me all over again. The imposing building, the formalities, the legal process, it all felt so cold, so distant. But this was where I had to be. This was where the reckoning would happen. Rachel was already there when we walked in. She was sitting with her lawyer, her head down, her shoulders slumped. She didn't look like the woman who had betrayed me, she looked small, defeated. But I knew better. This wasn't over yet. The courtroom was quiet as we waited for the hearing to begin. My heart raced, but I kept my mind focused. I couldn't afford to get emotional now. This was my chance to get justice, to make sure Rachel knew that her actions had consequences. The judge entered, and the room grew still. I could feel the tension in the air, and for a moment, everything seemed to pause. The judge called the case, and Rachel's lawyer stood up first, presenting their argument. They painted Rachel as the victim, someone who had made a mistake, someone who had been trying to help her family. But I wasn't fooled. When it was my turn, I stood up, my hands steady but my heart racing. I could feel everyone's eyes on me. The judge, the lawyers, Rachel. It felt like the weight of the world was on my shoulders. I began by explaining the situation, the loan, the documents I had found, the betrayal that had torn my family apart. I didn't hold back. I told the truth, every painful detail. As I spoke, I saw Rachel's face flush with shame. Her eyes were downcast, and I could see the guilt in her expression. But it was too late for her to take it back. Then, I handed over the evidence, each document, each piece of paper that proved Rachel's intentions. The loan application, Charlie's letter, the photos, and everything else that told the story of what had happened. The room was silent as the judge reviewed the evidence. Rachel's lawyer tried to argue, tried to make it seem like there was still some excuse for her actions, but I knew it was over. The truth had been laid bare. Finally, the judge spoke. "Ms. Rachel," he said, his voice firm, "it is clear that your actions were intentional. You deceived your family for personal gain, and that cannot go unpunished. The evidence is undeniable, and I find in favor of Ms. Mary." A wave of relief washed over me, but there was no joy. This wasn't a victory, it was a necessary step in the process of healing. The damage had been done, and I knew that nothing would ever be the same. But I had fought for justice, and I had won. Rachel's face went pale, and I could see the tears welling up in her eyes. But she didn't apologize. She didn't ask for forgiveness. Instead, she sat there, her shoulders hunched, knowing that this was the end. As we left the courthouse, I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel like a winner. What I felt was a quiet peace, the kind that comes from knowing that you've done the right thing, even when it's hard. The family might never be the same. Trust might never be the same. But justice had been served. And that was enough for me. The days after the court ruling were filled with a strange calm. I was exhausted, mentally and physically. The emotional toll of everything, the betrayal, the court, the confrontation, had taken more out of me than I'd like to admit. But I was also relieved, in a way. The truth had come out. Rachel would face the consequences for what she had done, and I wouldn't have to carry that weight anymore. The family, however, was another story. I didn't hear from Rachel right away. I wasn't sure if she was ashamed or just angry, but I knew that everything had changed between us. The lies, the manipulation, once they were exposed, there was no going back. I spent the next few weeks quietly going about my life, tending to my garden, knitting in the evenings, and keeping my house in order. It was a quiet peace, but it was mine. Matthew, though, kept in touch. He was still processing everything, still trying to wrap his mind around the truth. I didn't blame him. It had been a lot to take in. But slowly, he began to understand. Slowly, he began to see what Rachel had done. "You were right, Mom," he said one evening over the phone. "I've been talking to Rachel, but she's not the same. She's still not admitting everything, not really. She keeps saying she was just trying to help, but it's clear she wasn't. She just keeps digging herself deeper." I sighed, the weight of the conversation pressing on me. "She's not going to admit it, Matthew. People like that don't. But the truth is out now, and that's what matters." "You did the right thing," he said. "I'm proud of you. I don't know if I could have done it, but you did. And that takes guts." I smiled to myself. "You don't give me enough credit. I'm tougher than I look." He chuckled. "I've always known that." As time passed, Rachel's presence in the family grew smaller. She stopped showing up at family gatherings. There were no more holiday dinners with her sitting at the table, no more phone calls, no more pretending like everything was okay. I didn't miss her. It was hard, at first, to accept that a part of my family was gone, but the relief was greater. It wasn't peace in the traditional sense, but it was something I could live with. And then, one day, I got a letter from Rachel. It wasn't much, just a simple note, handwritten. It read, Mary, I know I can't undo what I've done. I can't take back the hurt I caused. But I want you to know that I'm sorry. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I don't deserve it. But I hope, in time, we can both heal. You've done what you needed to do, and I respect that. I always did. Take care of yourself, Rachel. I read it through twice, each word sinking in. There was no grand apology, no promises to change. But there was something in those words, something that felt like a weight being lifted, even if it wasn't forgiveness. It was an acceptance of what had happened. And that, in its own way, was enough. I set the letter down, staring at it for a long time. It didn't change the past. It didn't erase the betrayal, the hurt, or the damage done. But it gave me a sense of closure, something I hadn't realized I needed. Rachel had made her choices, and now she had to live with them. And I had made mine. As for me? I was healing. Slowly, piece by piece. I had my family, Matthew, my grandkids, my friends, and I had my dignity. I wasn't going to let Rachel's mistakes define me. I didn't need forgiveness to move on. What I needed was justice, and I had gotten that. The rest? Well, the rest would come in time. Looking back on everything, it's hard to say what I learned. I guess there's no one lesson, but there's a feeling of peace that comes with knowing you've done what's right. Even when it's hard. Even when it means standing up for yourself, no matter the cost. There's something freeing about facing the truth. It may not always make things better, but it does make things clearer. And in this case, clarity was the key. It helped me put the pieces together, helped me heal in ways I never expected. Rachel, well, she's still out there. I don't know what her future holds, and I can't control that. I can only control what's in front of me. My family, my home, my peace. That's what matters. I'll keep moving forward, taking each day as it comes. And as for all of you watching? You might be facing your own struggles, your own family issues. Maybe you've been betrayed, maybe you've had to fight for what's yours. Whatever it is, I hope you can find the strength to stand up for yourself, to do what's right, even when it's hard. You might not get an easy road, but in the end, you'll have your peace. And that's something no one can take from you. Before I close, let me ask you for a favor. If you found this story meaningful, if it resonated with you in any way, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. Turn on the little bell so you don't miss any more stories like this. And leave me a comment to let me know where you're watching from. It helps more than you know. Thanks for watching, take care of yourselves, and remember, justice always comes when we stand firm.